in the beginning of Shmuel Bet, and as you hopefully noted from the end of Shmuel Aleph, Shaul has passed away, and now it is David as king. Just to review what happened last week. Last week there is the Nar Amaleki. There's this young boy from Amalek who comes, and I would say the easiest read is to say that he was hoping for a reward for having brought the crown to David, but at the same time he indicates that he was the instrument of the mercy killing of Shaul. David will have no part of that, and David essentially executes him for having taken his sword to the term that David uses over and over again, Mashiach Hashem, the anointed of God. And this is how the crown comes to David. We're going to see, likely next week, that the acceptance of David as king is not super smooth. There's certainly going to be resistance, and you're going to see a tension that it's an old tension and a tension that will in essence last through much of Tanakh, and that is the tension between the Rachel side of the family and the Leah side of the family. David comes from the tribe of Yehuda. Yehuda is a child of Leah, right? Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Yehuda is the fourth child of Leah, and so this means that the kingship now, as promised in the book of Bereshit, is going to land on the head of a descendant of Yehuda. The verses in Bereshit, the blessing that Yaakov gives his sons is Lo Yasur Shevet Yehuda Mechokek Mi Ben Raglav. The scepter shall not pass from Judah, and the chisel of the lawmaker from between his feet, which is understood that ultimately Yehuda is destined for the role of leadership, kingship in the Jewish people. Shaul, however, comes from the tribe of Benjamin. Binyamin is, of course, the youngest child of Rachel, and so the Rachel branch of the family has its king. But obviously, when that sun sets, then we have a whole different. We have now a struggle which we've seen in different places. Since you guys did the book of Shoftim, what other famous instance have you seen this struggle take place? Famous and graphic instance. Do you remember the story of the Pilegesh of Giva, the concubine of Giva? Very graphic story about
the body at the end.
Yes. The very difficult story where yes, the body they cut up her body and send it out to the 12 tribes, and then the 11 other tribes take up arms against the tribe of Benjamin, and it's a civil war, almost destroys them. That's the first civil war. Here, this is the second civil war. The third one falls on just slightly different lines. I won't test you on it because you probably haven't studied it, at least not in this context. But after Shlomo, King Rechavam, the kingdom will split largely on the Rachel Leah lines. Ephraim, which is the largest tribe, which is a sort of, it goes Rachel, Yosef, Ephraim, right? So you're on the Rachel side of things, and there's going to be another split between the 10 kingdoms and the 2 kingdoms. It's Yehuda versus what's called Yisrael. So we're going to see that this is a very tense moment of putting these two things together. That's all actually good background for understanding what David is trying to do. David's aim, and we're going to see this come up over and over again, what he really wants to do is to keep the stitching together between the 12 tribes. He's very interested in making sure that there is unity in the 12 tribes. We're going to see that in a number of places, especially in important structural pieces. Things like, where is the capital of the Jewish people? Who owns the Beit HaMikdash? Very important pieces like that, where he doesn't want to give one tribe favoritism over others. But there's a lot of challenge to get through before that. And I think it's important to note, and we'll see this on almost everything that we're going to touch in the next little while, David is extremely respectful of Shaul. And we've seen that already, right? Does anybody want to throw out an example of where we've seen that already? David being very respectful of Shaul?
He could have killed him, but he didn't.
Right.
Cave.
Exactly. Right. Twice, actually. Right. Once in the cave and once when he was sleeping in the camp. Right. He takes the water bottle and the spear, I think. Right. And his companion wants to strike Shaul down, and he says, you cannot touch Mashiach Hashem. You cannot touch the anointed of God. And that is very much David's sort of we'll call it his modus operandi, which is we're gonna protect the Mashiach Hashem. So let's now look at the second half of this chapter. Last week we did the first half of the chapter. This week we're going to do the second half of the chapter. The second half of the chapter is all a very famous poem, and this poem is something which provides language that is going to be seized upon by Hebrew poets for the next, I don't know, well, maybe not quite 3,000 years, but close to 3,000 years let's say call it 3,000 years. Next 3,000 years of Hebrew poets will be borrowing from these words of David. In certain ways, this is one of the most quoted poems. Now, it starts with a word which is very unique in the Hebrew language. It says here vayekonen, right? So vayekonen means the root of kuf nun is the word of, it means a lamentation. You'll see here in English it's translated as a lament. He lamented with a lamentation. The special prayers that we have, for example, on Tisha B'Av, there's only one day of the year where you say these kinds of prayers, and they're called kinot. And it means that they are specific poems of lament. And this particular one is one of the first that we ever see. And this kina is going to be, the introduction is Vayokonin David at kina hazot al Shaul al Yonatan beno. This is for Shaul and his son Yonatan. Now, what is very interesting about this particular kina is that it's going to start with a very interesting turn of phrase. And that turn of phrase is that he's going to say, Vayomer lelamed b'nei Yehuda keshet, hinei ktuva al sefer hayashar. He says, to teach the sons of Israel the bow. What do you think that means?
The difference between Judah and Israel?
What and how is the bow the difference between Yehuda and Israel? Any thoughts about that?
one section more skilled in hunting or things like that with the bow? What type of bow?
Yeah, no, it's a bow and arrow. It's for sure the bow and arrow. And it may be something which is indicative of the tribe of Yehuda. I think the Radak makes such a point because he notes that this idea of the blessing of Jacob was that Yehuda's hands will be on the neck of his enemies, and so he interprets this as what military metaphor is that? That's the archer whose hand then strikes directly at the neck of his enemies. So that is one thing which is specifically related to Yehuda. There are others who suggest that how did Shaul die? Anybody?
By the sword.
Well, he fell on his sword. Good. What put him into a difficult place? What put him into why did he have to fall on his sword? Maybe is a better.
Was it that he got hit by an arrow?
Yes, exactly. Right. The Ralbag, Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, says that it was the Philistine archers who surrounded him, right? Which means that maybe what the advantage of the Plishtim over the Bnei Israel is the fact that their archers overtook them, and so this is going to be our anthem when we come to practice archery in Jewish in the Tzahal training camps. We better learn this because the story of Shaul was his archers weren't strong enough. Their archers outdid our archers, and we lost our king. Right, so this becomes an anthem to articulate why it is that you need to be good at archery. There are a number of other different theories which others present. Rabbi Amnon Mazak points out that it's possible that the Benjaminites were really the archers, and there are various references to Shoftim that the Benjaminites had learned these skills of slingshots and archery, and so maybe it's connected to that. But I like the idea that this is something that is meant to be is meant to be an anthem for soldiers who need to know that they need to learn archery. Now, the other part, which is a little challenging about this sentence, is it says Hinek tuva al sefer hayashar. Right? Now look at the translation. It says, "Behold, it is written in the book of Jashar." Right? Now, first of all, I never met Jashar. I never heard of him. And Sefer HaYashar, anybody know what the word Yashar means in Hebrew?
Straight.
Right, exactly. So according to the Gemara in Avodah Zarah brings 3 different positions of rabbis of the Talmud in terms of what Sefer HaYashar is. So according to the first opinion, which is the opinion of Rabbi Chia bar Abba, is Sefer HaYashar refers to the books of it talks about it refers to Bereshit because the Torah will in Bamidbar say Tamot nafshi mot yesharim, let my death be the death of the Yesharim. The Yesharim means the straight ones, right? And this refers to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And so the Sefer HaYashar might refer to the book of, if you will, the legacy of the Jewish people, right? It's meant to be a legacy of the Jewish people, or it could mean that this is a reference to that same idea of Yehuda. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies, right? So that this is an old instruction. In other words, this book, this principle of learning the bow goes all the way back to the blessing that Yaakov gave to Yehuda. And this is your legacy, children of Yehuda, that you need to know the bow. Second opinion in the Talmud is that it refers to the book of Devarim. How does it come to mean the book of Devarim? Because in the book of Devarim it says, "V'asita hayashar v'atov b'nei Hashem." You shall do that which is right and good in the eyes of Hashem. And in other words, then they say, well, how does it refer to archery? And the answer is that in the same Sukkim, it says it says about Yehuda, with his hands he contended for himself. So what kind of warfare requires two hands? So then the answer is archery. So the way I would put this all together is, what it means is that you need to be able to, a country needs to be able to learn warcraft in order to defend itself. We may believe in peace, but it would be irresponsible not to teach people how to defend themselves. Just an interesting parallel in this, the Torah says that any parent who doesn't teach their child a profession teaches them to be a criminal, essentially a robber. Why? Because if, let's just use the Talmudic context. Let's just say you taught your child to be a cobbler, right? So people need shoes, you make shoes, people buy shoes, that's how you eat, that's how you live, right? Perfectly respectable profession. That's how you're going to make a living. You teach your child to do that, and you keep them away from crime. But if you don't teach your child a profession, how are they going to make a living? So the only way they're going to be able to make a living is through crime. Even though the Talmud is very interested in the person teaching their child Torah, and the Torah should be a focus. If you fail to teach your child a profession, that is considered a core responsibility of the father to the son. In a similar fashion, I think that it's fair to say that when it says this is written in the Sefer HaYashar, the book of the straight, what it's meant to be telling us is that if you need to be able to maintain a defensive army. You need to be able to maintain an army that is going to defend against others. And so it is in that context that the Sefer HaYashar, the book that tells you what to do, how to be straight, it includes this instruction about how to operate the bow. So again, the first version of what Sefer HaYashar is, the book of the straight, is going to refer to Bereshit. This is a legacy from the blessing of Yaakov. The second one, the second opinion in that piece of Talmud is it's about the Sefer HaYashar is the book of straight instruction, which would be the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy sort of Moshe's last charge to the Jewish people, in which it tells you, you have to learn how to protect yourselves. The third one is probably the easiest one to really understand and digest, is the third opinion in the Talmud about what Sefer HaYashar is it is the book of Shoftim. And the reason that they find the way that they find to connect this to the book of Shoftim is in a way the opposite. In the first two interpretations the Talmud presented, it was Yashar, the book of the straight, people who are good and straight, right? Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they're the straight ones, right? In the book of Moshe, where it says you should do the right thing, so Yashar there refers to your actions instead of to particular people. The last one, it connects to Shoftim, not because things are good, but because things are bad. It's like it says that each person did Asher Yashar Be'einav. He did that which was right in his own eyes. So this is, in a way, it's a little bit more to street wisdom. it says, even on the street, even in the Sefer Yashar, even in the annals of what people know on the street, right? When everybody did what was right in their eyes, even there, everybody agreed you needed to teach your children how to play the bow, how to use the bow. So those are three opinions in the Talmud. Right? Amnon Bazak, who's a rabbi at Yeshivat Har Etzion, he has another interesting interpretation. He says that if you look through Tehillim, you'll notice that there are many introductions to the Tehillim, which are about almost like a musical notation. Lamentation b'neginot, right? Which is often translated a psalm to the conductor, right? You'll notice that there's sort of a sense that there are certain Tehillim that have an indication, this one's to the conductor, this one's to various musical or poetic pieces. So he says that this particular line, L'lamed b'nei Yehuda kashet, is maybe not the bow of archery, but maybe a bow that, a bow like a harp or bowed musical instrument. This is interesting. So there you have four theories on what Sefer HaYashar is. But in any event, this is an introduction and lets us know that this is a bit of a, if you will, it's a bit of an anthem. Okay. Now, let's get into the poem itself. Now, to be clear, I think that analyzing poetry is a whole new set of skills, and it can be a little bit complicated, but I will hopefully be able to pull it apart in somewhat organized fashion. So this particular poem, the proper parts of the poem. Let's say we're treating verse 18 as the introduction. Verse 19 is the beginning of the poem, and we're going to see that this poem follows what we call a chiastic structure. Chiastic structure is the most prominent form of poetic and even literary structure in the Bible, and it follows the term, the pattern CBAA-BC, meaning that, if you will, it is like a diamond surrounded by baguettes. You put the smallest baguette on the outside, then you put a slightly bigger one next to the principal diamond, and in the center you have a diamond centerpiece. Allow me to pull back for a second and show you a very interesting version of that. The book of Bereshit is the book of the Jewish people before Matan Torah. The book of Devarim is the Jewish people after Matan Torah. Shoftim is Shemot is the book of the Jewish people transitioning to being able to have a Beit HaMikdash in their midst. The book of Bamidbar is the book of the Jewish people moving away from the first Mishkan. The book of Vayikra sits in the middle. The book of Vayikra is the book of the Mishkan itself, of the temple, the eternal preservation of the moment of Sinai. And if you look at the very center of the book of Vayikra, anybody know almost to the dead center the verse in the center of the book of Vayikra is? It's probably very hard for you to know this. I shouldn't ask you to guess. But the answer is, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. You should love your neighbor as you love yourself. Ani Hashem, I am God. So there's an argument to be made that when the Parshat Kedoshim, the parsha in the center of all of it is the parsha called Kedoshim to you should be holy, and in the center and in essentially the center of that parsha is this core concept that Hillel will say, when he's asked to teach the entire Torah on one foot, he teaches V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, you should love your neighbors, love yourself. Right? The rest is commentary, Zil Gamor, go out and learn. So that we see that the Torah sort of builds to this ethical crescendo of this central principle of love your neighbor as you love yourself. I am Hashem. That sort of sits at the very center of the pinnacle of the structure. And so there are many, many, many narrative pieces which do this. So this poem follows a similar structure. And I'm just going to show you how that structure plays out. So
Rabbi, can I ask a question?
yeah, sure.
I'm just a little confused because you're saying this is a poem. Is that what you're saying? Like this is
From sentence, yeah. So because here we're told that it's a kina. So a kina is a form of poetry. So it's right here. It says Vayikonin David. So that's a form of poetry. And then it's this sentence is sort of a somewhat typical introduction. And I'll show you how the structure works between sentence 19 and 27, at the very end of the chapter. It follows a poetic structure.
Can I just ask you something? Just because I get lost in your details. So I'm just wondering, like, I care less that it's the structure, but I just want to know the bottom line. Sorry for my impatience. I'm a little like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to.
Well, yeah. So sometimes you have to look at form in order to get the content. So we'll get there. I promise. I promise we'll get there. But So first of all, here's what I would say. First bottom line, right? First bottom line is when David writes this poem, he's writing it to be this anthem for the Jewish people, and it has that quality for the generations. I'll give you just an example of that. If you look at the Kel Malei Rachamim that was written for the soldiers of the Israeli Defense Forces, you will see this phrase: "Min nisharim kalu me'ayarot gaveru." They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. So that's sort of a great example of a phrase that is going to be taken up by Hebrew poets forever. It's an anthem-like statement about Jewish soldiers: swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. And so David, when he writes this, I guess he has a lot of forethought about where this is going to be positioned. And part of this is positioned, what do they say about the Israeli soldier? A Tanakh in one hand and a rifle in the other. So this is a little bit of that idea that you need to know what happened to King Shaul. It's funny how the Israeli I don't know where this is exactly said, but they say Masadan lo yipol shenit. Masada will never fall again. Well, Masada is really a sideshow. I would say it should be Shaul lo yipol shenit. We won't let Saul fall again, right? Because that's what this is. And so this is a little bit about the ethical will, if you will, that is distilled out of the death of Shaul, that Jews should know how to protect themselves. Okay, so that's one bottom line that we can pull away from this. The structure. So you'll see this phrase also becomes an anthem-like phrase for the Jewish people. Eich naflu giborim, how the mighty have fallen. Maybe it is a question, right? How could the mighty have fallen? But you'll see that this very same phrase, Eich naflu giborim, how the mighty have fallen, is going to appear at the beginning and the end of this poem. So this is your first chiasm, right? That you see that the mighty have fallen. He starts with the mighty have fallen. He ends with the mighty have fallen. Now, you'll also see that there's going to be a parallel between, you'll see here we have Benot Yisrael, the daughters of Israel, on the one hand, and you're going to see here, he's going to talk about Benot Plishtim, right? So you're going to see that there is this parallelism, again, on the let's say we'll call it the B section. If it goes C, B, A, B, C. So in the B section, we're going to have this reference to Benot. In the first one, it's Benot Plishtim, and in the second iteration, it's going to be Benot Yisrael, the daughters of Israel. The center of this articulation is the following: Midam chalalim michelev giborim, from the blood of the slain, from the fat of the heroes. Keshet Yonatan lo nasog achor, the bow of Yonatan was not turned back. right? V'cherev Shaul lo tashuv reka, and the sword of Saul did not return empty. Shaul Yonatan, Shaul and Yonatan, and who were loved and dear in their lives, uvmotam lo nifradu, right? And they and in death they were not divided between each other. Minisharim kalu me'arayarot kaver. They were swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. So this is the very centerpiece. Now, getting to the centerpiece gets us to this, to another part of David's central purpose. And his central purpose here is, first of all, when's the last time we heard about the bow of Yonatan?
Never?
When he was sending a message to David.
Yes, exactly. Right?
Right.
Remember that the bow of Yonatan is the way, if he shoots it too short, that means David stays, everything's fine in Shaul's house. If he overshoots the target, it means David, get out of here, right? Things are bad for you, right? And it's interesting, the Keshet Yehonatan, the bow of Yonatan was something that separated, Yehonatan and Shaul, right? That this was the wedge between the two of them. Remember, Shaul says to him, if this guy becomes king, you won't be, right? Remember that dinner table discussion where Shaul essentially excoriates his own son, right? But David, when he writes this lamentation, as if there was not a coat of paint in between Shaul and Yonatan, right? He presents them as a united front. And Yonatan is perhaps the true picture of loyalty. He is a poor guy. He is torn between his loyalty to David and his loyalty to his father. He's never truly disloyal to his father in a way that actively hurts his father, only in that he helps David, right? So, and Yonatan has not sinned, and Yonatan probably knows that what's going to happen on that field in Gilboa, and he is entirely unified with his father. But this is a picture of two people who fought for Bnei Israel without reservation and with great heroism, right? And David, in the center of his kina, in the crescendo moment, when he went, that this is the, forgive the modern term, this is the beat drop in the song. I think I'm getting that right, but I think that if you, Dina, this is more your children's
Yes.
than mine, right? It's in these remixes, you wait for the beat to drop, or what is it? The hook, I think, is what they call it, maybe.
You're doing pretty good, Rabbi. That's pretty good.
Okay, all right, excellent. So this is what that was, right? This is the chorus of this song, and in this chorus of this song, David is telling everybody, these are your heroes, Shaul and Yonatan. Who? If we went back, I don't know, 7-8 chapters, right? There are people in David's company who are describing Shaul how? They describe him as the enemy, right? One of them basically says to him, right, in the chapter where they go into to steal the jug of water and the spear, right? He's like, I'll end your problems right now. We'll kill Shaul. But that David is making something very clear here. The first half of this chapter, he puts the Amaleki child to death because, or not, maybe not child, but youth to death because he killed Mashiach Hashem. He killed the anointed of God, right? And here he is announcing in a full-throated fashion, this is our hero, right? This is not the poem of somebody who's trampling on the legacy of Shaul, right? This is the poem of somebody who is giving a full-throated approbation of the last king, right? So he's not. This is not the. He's not pulling down the statue of Saddam Hussein in the main square, right? He's not. He's not turning Leningrad back into St. Petersburg, right? This is somebody who's really letting everybody know our anthem is going to be the anthem of Shaul and Yonatan in the best possible way. This may also be a good, there's an old joke that goes as follows. Someone comes to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, I want you to bury my dog, Rover. He's always been a faithful dog." The rabbi says, "Look, I don't do pet cemeteries. It's really beneath me." So the man promises, $5 million to the endowment. The rabbi can't say no. He swallows his dignity, gives a eulogy for Rover, and in the synagogue, he's giving this eulogy for the dog, and the man is in tears, and the rabbi goes to comfort him afterwards. He says, "Reb Chaim, I don't understand what's wrong. What's wrong? Why are you inconsolable?" He says, "I knew Rover was such a good dog. I just never knew he was such a good Zionist." Right. So the joke obviously plays on the fact that the rabbis, they exaggerated funerals. My parents' rabbi once told this joke that his president says, "Rabbi, when people pass away, you always thought this guy was the best, the most genuine, the kindest." He says, "How can everybody be the kindest?" He turns to him, he says, "Irv, when it's your turn, I'll lie about you too." So we rabbis, we have a bad reputation for exaggeration, who knows what. But what I tell people is that the Shulchan Aruch says when you eulogize someone, you eulogize them on their best day, and as they were on their best day. And so David, in his eulogy for Shaul and Yonatan, he's not giving the full picture of Shaul. Shaul had a lot of warts, right? There were a lot of things to criticize him, but David is talking about his bravery on his last day and his fight for the Jewish people. And so that's part of what is coming out in this particular piece. Now, I just want to point out one thing that just sort of it just follows along this theme. And so sentence 21, it says, "Hare b'Gilboa altav amatar alechem," right? The mountain of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you. This is also, by the way, you'll see in the Crusader poems, they complain to the stars that they should no longer broadcast their full light after the Jews in the Crusades passed away. It's sometimes a turn to the physical setting that should mirror the sadness of the Jewish people. That even nature should take some lament. So this is sort of like a curse on Gilboa, that it shouldn't ever return to its glory, right? You shouldn't get rain. You shouldn't get dew. Usdeit trumot, right? You shouldn't get beautiful fruits, right?
Rabbi,
Yes.
when we were in Israel, we were nearby Mount Gilboa, and we were told that nothing much grows on it.
There you go. Because David uttered this curse.
Yeah.
And so to me, the most interesting line here is, it says, Kisham nig'al magen giborim. For there the shield of the mighty was, nig'al means became disgusting, right? It was despised, it was reviled. Here they have the shield of the mighty was vilely cast away. Magen Shaul, the shield of Shaul, bli Mashiach Hashem, which was unanointed with oil. That term is a little hard to figure out. Some people say that they used to put oil on the shield so that the arrows would slip off them or something like that. and maybe in this case, Shaul was fighting at some disadvantage. But to me, the best interpretation is that they did not respect Shaul as someone who himself was anointed with oil. Like this idea of Mashiach Bashemen, that's the term that David uses to constantly tell us about the unique status of Shaul, and no one should touch him because he is Mashiach Hashem. He is the anointed of God. And so this, I think, is best understood that Shaul was not properly respected on that battlefield. Okay, gonna end with one very interesting piece here. This piece has caused great controversy over the years, so it's at least worth being aware of how this is understood. This is David speaking very personally. He says, "Tsar li alecha achi Yonatan na'amta li ma'od." I am particularly bitter for you, my brother Yonatan. Right? You were very dear to me. Right? And ki nifla'ata ahavatich li me'avat nafshim. For your love of me was more wondrous, more wonderful than the love of women. So the critics have said, well, there must have been some kind of amorous relationship between David and Yonatan. I would say there is absolutely no evidence for that at all outside of this one line, because it references the love of women. Some of the commentators suggest that the reason that it says me'avat nashim is because David has very complicated relationships with women, right? His relationship with Shaul's daughters, Michal, right? They become very complicated, these dual loyalties, right? So, and we'll see how Michal is critical of him later on, and he essentially becomes estranged from her. There are many complications in David's life with women, but Yonatan was a pure, uncomplicated love. In other words, Yonatan himself was very conflicted between Shaul and David, but when you look at the David-Yonatan side of it, the conflict never bled into the David side. All of the conflict bled into the Shaul side of the relationship. And so it is a very pure love, and could be distinguished from the relationships that David had with women, even Yonatan's own siblings, who had trouble, stepping out of their father's house. Don't forget also that there was this whole complication with the marriage of David and Palti ben Laish, right, who was given to Shaul's daughter instead of David, right? There are all these complications when it comes to women, but when it comes to men, when it came to the relationship with David and Yonatan, it is a very pure and I guess an uninfected kind of a relationship. But I don't think that the simple meaning of this suggests anything else. And the relationship between David and Yonatan is probably the greatest example of personal friendship that we have anywhere in Tanakh. And I think it's just wrong to try and throw 21st century politics into that relationship. And I guess to go back to Robin's point, so what's the takeaway from this kinah? The takeaway from this kinah is a little bit, this idea of how the mighty have fallen is perhaps best understood as how did we let the mighty fall, right? That we should have protected them, right? We should have rallied around him as if he was the one anointed with oil. We have to learn our archery better. so that we no longer put the king of Israel into these this kind of situation. Now that's obviously for David a very self-serving message, not necessarily wrong, but this is his point. His point is that we have to be able to defend our king, and that has to become the anthem that we continue to sing for generations. And yeah, okay. So, questions, comments, thoughts.
Rabbi, the pattern of the poem, is it like, do they change like every time? Or is this like, like the acronym, the word, or not acronym, palindrome race car, if you spell it backwards and forwards, it's the same. And then the E's in the middle, sort of like, and in this poem, the high point would have been like verse 22, you're saying?
Yeah, it will always be in the middle, but they could be of different lengths. In other words, the number of pieces on the outside can vary.
Oh, okay.
But you always look to the middle point for the crescendo.
Okay, and in this case, like the theme was based on like sort of David honoring Jonathan and Shaul, and he wasn't necessarily taking responsibility for letting them fall, but just sort of honoring them because of, despite what Shaul did, he was still the anointed one. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, there's another sub theme here which I didn't really get into, is that when he talks about Shaul, each one is in the first half, Yonatan's not mentioned by name, but Shaul is, right?
Yeah.
And then in the second half, Yonatan is mentioned by name, but Shaul is not, right? So Yonatan actually ends up in a more special place in the end, because he's slain on the high places, and he has this one line which is very personal, right? Everything else in this poem is very much has a very national perspective, but this last line is a very personal one about Yonatan. And so you get the subtle picture of here, I was very close to Yonatan. This is a personal loss for me, but the more generic, if you will, respect belongs to Shaul. So it's a carefully designed piece for him not to say, I was like a son to Shaul, because he knows that that's not really the case.
Right.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
if the line is that that neither Jonathan nor Saul, they came back empty.
I think that means that they gave as good as they got, but they fell in the end. In other words, they took down Plishtim with them. They weren't a pushover. Just the battle overtook them.
Thank you.
I find it interesting that in number 23, he makes a point of saying that they were not divided, even in their death. It's interesting because in their life, they were divided. They had different opinions, especially about David.
It's true. Yeah, no, I think that's, in a way, that's exactly how David is stitching it. In other words, that bimotam, in their death, they weren't divided, meaning at that moment, those two stood together when it really counted. Right?
Yeah.
I realize that the translation is even in their death, but the word even is not really there.
Oh, okay.
The word, it says, right, uvimotam is and in their death.
Oh, that makes all the difference. Yeah.
That's an editor's choice there, I guess. All right, Tov, everyone have a wonderful week. And I unfortunately am flying next Thursday. So if you want, we can move the class to Wednesday. or I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about how best to do it.
Wednesday's great, I think. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm good for
Sure.
Wednesday.
I can join
Okay.
Wednesday.
Yeah,
Right. So, okay, let me just double check that I have nothing booked at 9:30 on Wednesday morning.
Rabbi, can you follow up with letting whoever needs to know?
Yeah, I will absolutely do that. Once.
Also, you said this was in Tehillim.
No, I
Which
didn't
song?
say this was in Tehillim.
Oh,
Um,
this just, I thought all the poetry were the Tehillim.
It is. I was comparing it to the Tehillim. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
9:30 next Wednesday. I will have it updated on the website and we'll send out a reminder.
Rabbi, can I just ask you a question after everyone leaves?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi.
thank you, Rabbi.
Rabbi, see
Thank
you.
you.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi.
Thank you very much. What's in your brain? It just amazes me how much you put in there, because I kind of still have a hard time kind of just getting the basic grasp of thing, and I'm wondering how I can improve that. Like I'm just so new at this stuff that I find it too overwhelming. I just do.
Uh-huh.
I can't follow it well enough. Like I can't tell you, I can't summarize this class after. I can't, and I don't know what to do, but I'm wondering if you have any advice.
Well, so I would say, I mean, okay, granted, this one was a little bit more complicated because we were looking at a poem and we were trying to place that, we were doing, and the poetic analysis is more complicated.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's not fair to judge yourself on this one class. Some of the other ones have more of a narrative arc, and we try and summarize the narrative and then put a focus on that. In this one, I think I think it's good that you you said to me, okay, what's the point of this? And I think that the point to take away here is how and when you see the chorus of this poem, the chorus is how great David and Yonatan were, and that David is even though these were people he had, especially when it comes to Shaul, that he had a complicated relationship with, but in this moment, it's a full-throated praise for Shaul.
Okay.
I hear what you're saying, and maybe I shouldn't. The whole bit about the David and the love of women and the criticism people had about, or what some of the people will say. I feel like when I come past these things, maybe I can't resist because it's there, and it sometimes comes up, and I want people to be able to answer that question. So I think sometimes if that I'm going, I'll try and indicate that this is a bit of a side point, that when I go and I sort of just pull up pop-up window and say, okay, this is a bit of a pop-up window. It's going to be a contained thought. If you're interested in it, great. You got to take that away. It's a nugget. Then you put it back away, and then we're back to the central.
I think what the problem, I think part of the problem is, Rabbi, I haven't joined your history class, and so I'm kind of just feeling like I'm just coming out of nowhere trying to understand this dialogue and not knowing so much more that needs to know before all this. Like, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, I don't know how to get. And if I was to join your class, I would be overwhelmed with that too. So is there a Cole's notes of me kind of like, I don't want to waste my time or your time learning when I don't feel like
I don't feel like, I mean, just I don't feel like I don't think your comment or the way in which that interaction, I don't think it's a waste of time for us to get to the bottom of that. I will. I'm a work in progress too, so I'm going to try and do the summary of things. the one thing I would just say is that like a lot of what we some of the things we did today, or I try to do, and I do this on purpose, is because, you know, sometimes, and I have this problem too, like at our age, you learn a chapter, you move on to the next chapter, and it's like Etch a Sketch, shake it up, and it's gone.
Horrible.
Right.
It's
So
horrible.
I throw those things out because the text is really going to, you know, have us, it wants us to go back and think about, you know, the bow of Yonatan. Well, that bow of Yonatan is really a, you know, the last time we saw that was a story that separated David and Shaul. So I'm trying to push people to recall those memories, because the more I push you to recall, the more you will remember them.
Yeah, the problem is I don't recall anything. Like I feel like I have Alzheimer's right now, like or something. Like because you know I try to take notes and I don't even think they're effective. Like I just and if I don't take or write
What
something down,
I would do is, you know, Shabbos afternoon, pull out your notes and read them a second time. You'd be surprised how much one extra iteration gives you on the on remembering these kinds of things.
okay. So the thing is that the reason why and I don't think anyone else wants it. So the reason why I want this text is because then it jogs my memory, and then I take like if I used to with Rabbi Federgren, I would take those notes and circle words or circle letters, and I have another visual in front of me. Right now, without that visual, my notes.
Yeah, I apologize. Unfortunately, yesterday, you know, I in the morning, Joseph pulls me aside, and we had another funeral that we had to do, and so it threw a wrench into my day, and then, you know, it just was it was just, I got the things other things that needed to get done during the day, just it blew up because of a funeral that had a whole bunch of other, you know, sensitive pieces to it. So, you know, those things sometimes happen. I will try to get back into giving you guys the text next week. And I'm going to try also, like I'll tell you next week, one of the things we're going to have to do just to make everybody's life a little bit miserable is we need to be able to see Shaul's family tree as it permutes with some very funny names that are not going to be familiar
Rabbi,
to.
like I'm so confused with this, our whole family tree. Like there's names being thrown at me. I can't even tell you where Yonatan, who he is and where he is. Like I just know about him.
All right, so that's okay. So maybe that's a good place to start for us next week, is we can just do the family tree, because you know, David is married to so that's a good place to start. I'll start there next week so that we can sort of see the family tree and appreciate the whole.
Okay, well, here's my request. If you could, whatever you can send out ahead of time, I'll look at it, and then at least when you read it to me, like I love pre-reading stuff because then I get a second time to remember it. That's how I learned.
Okay.
I think. I'm hoping. So,
Yep.
That's one thing. And then the other thing is, are you giving any classes for Pesach?
Yeah. So you saw the hopefully you saw that spreadsheet that I set out. So I think it's okay.
Why.
Yeah. So I tried to be very organized, and I think Anna and Rabbi Schachter got that prepared. So if you look at the link, there's a link I sent out in the email. I think it was Sunday night I sent it out.
Okay.
And
I'll
there and so well, let me just I'll share it again with you right now. That might make life a little bit easier for you, and not terribly hard for me.
Thank you.
Now it's in this navigating the sheet. So I pulled out the Pesach stuff specifically in okay, I'm sending it to you right now. It's specifically on this what says sheet 3.
Where am I looking? Where?
You got it. I just sent you an email with a link.
So I have to go to my email right now. Okay, hold on.
No, you don't have to go right now. You can get it when it's comfortable. I'm just letting you know that it's the sheet 3 is where all of the Pesach programming is. Maybe I can rename the sheet. Let me see if I can rename the sheet. Just call it Pesach programming. Let me do this.
Because Google
Rename.
Sheets
Okay.
has to sign in. Like,
Here we go.
I'm lost.
What's that?
It says with Google I have to sign in, so,
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So it just says Pesach program, and you'll see there are things we're starting already. This Shabbat afternoon, we
Yeah.
are starting. So I'm doing the halacha classes on Kitniot for Ashkenazi vegans on Pesach, and Rabbi Schachter at Sudash Shishit is doing Chassidut for the Seder, seminal stories and teachings of Hasidic masters on the Exodus and the Haggadah.
So is there anything offered during the week, or is it only?
Yeah. There's lots of stuff offered during the week, but we're just starting.
All right.
There's April 6th, we have a virtual Seder workshop. April 7th, we have a community rabbi Seder on Zoom. Rabbi Schachter is going to be doing, I think, his basics class on online. There's a bunch of stuff that's all going into that. Into that, so you'll see.
Okay, I'll look and see. I'll try to access that.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Rabbi.
Sure. Okay. All right. Have a good day.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you.